are so overstressed. Every newsroom is trying to do more with fewer people. They have completely disrupted their deadlines. The newspaper that he's talking about, the Birmingham News, along with two sister publications, the Huntsville Times and the Mobile Press Register, all quit publishing daily. They're now publishing 3 days a week. It's all under the banner of AL.com. They consider themselves to be a digital news operation first, that then collates and collects and curates its best posts of the past few days into an occasional print publication. It has radically altered the media environment because a lot of the TV newsrooms are actually relying on the daily newspaper to help set the agenda on what stories get covered. So everybody's scrambling around. Everybody's dealing with these new deadlines. We've got photographers with the Chicago Sun-Times that aren't even photographers anymore. They let go the entire award-winning staff, and now they're telling the staff to go out with iPhones and take pictures. And they've got training for them on how to take iPhone video. All right? So the reporters are doing more, and they're not exactly skilled at the things they're being asked to do. And what suffers is storytelling. What suffers is the thing that humanizes your brand. All right? The other thing that I want to include in brand journalism is the idea of the embedded nature. Now, we never really talked about embedded reporters until we started getting into the Gulf Wars. And you take the reporter and the photographer and the crew, and you stick them with the unit, and they ride around, and they see and show, and they do everything that you would ordinarily see. That's the same concept that we want to take into corporations and into organizations. If you can't rely on your natural media to tell your story the way you're used to having it told, then you need to essentially embed the same skill sets within your organization. So it's the embedded journalist. The last thing you've got to consider is a neutral point of view. All right, Wikipedia has kind of made this famous, but your company is not going to lose control by turning trained journalists loose inside your organization. You're still going to have the agenda setting function of picking which stories are going to get covered. But the more you do as a storyteller to give it the same kind of journalistic polish and neutral point of view that it would get if it were being done on the outside, the more likely your public is going to accept it. They're going to recognize it for quality. 20, 25 years ago, it would be unheard of for a network news operation to use video or any type of digital assets from an organization. It's like Edward Murrow would be turning over his grave if we did that. And now, you look at an organization like the Red Cross. When a big hurricane comes in, the Weather Channel, Fox News, CNN, they call Red Cross National Headquarters and say, hey, where are your crews going to be deployed? Because as long as you're going to be there, we're going to send our people elsewhere to get video. The environment's changed. So if you can do it with a good neutral point of view, it will be accepted, it will be used, particularly as the job of journalists goes more towards curation instead of actual content creation. Now, let's talk about what brand journalism is not. Go ahead and snap that. Get that QR code. Get it and put it out there, because we're going to be sharing messages here. Brand journalism is not puffery. All right, this is not the typical puff piece that you go and talk about just how wonderful you are, and you're not trying to drive that end in mind. You're trying to tell stories. You want to tell stories that humanize your company by featuring the humans who work in your company. All right? It's not boilerplate. I actually had several instances when I was writing news releases where I would send a news release to some of these small weekly papers. And one in particular actually printed the entire news release, front page over the fold, and 60% of the copy was the boilerplate. So you don't want it to seem like it's just rote. Okay, you want to make it actual news value. It's not just news releases. News releases can be a place for you to start. As you're going through the process of creating the news release, you ask, how can we spin this out? How can we make this bigger? How can we make this better? And it's not easy. How many of you work for organizations with more than 500 people? More than 1,000 people? More than 5,000 people? Okay. Odds are you've already got a corporate communications staff that's doing all sorts of things. All right? Getting everybody together, getting them on the same page isn't easy. We'll talk about that. But the most important thing that I want you to come away with today is that brand journalism is not content marketing. Okay? Very similar in terms of some of the activities that are engaged, but it comes from a very different place in the heart. Most of your content marketing is designed around, we have a product that we need to push, and we need to get a certain percentage bump in what we're doing with this particular product. So let's develop a series of articles or blog posts and get placement around that particular product to drive that particular mission. Brand journalism is about covering the people and the things that your organization does every day that you wish people knew about. Because if they did, they would feel better about your product. They would feel better about you as a company. They would feel like you are human. So brand journalism has a lot in common with content marketing, but it is not content marketing. Now, Jeff mentioned that I've been actually been doing this for a long time, and I kind of kicked myself that I was 3/4 of the way through this presentation. I realized, you know, I haven't gone back to the roots. So this is actually the very first post that I did for the Birmingham Area Red Cross Media Alerts blog in February of 2006. And even then, we were recognizing that we've got to do more to help get our story out. We need to do more to get the mainstream journalists to just pick up what we're doing. And that involved doing things like audio posts, making sure that we have we're linking them to good information. We would go out to have big apartment fires, house fires, and we do audio updates that the radio stations would just grab directly off of the RSS feed. Had a lot of success with it because we were helping do their job, but we were doing it in a way that was professionally done and had a neutral point of view. And they used it, and they still use it to this day. This is the most recent incarnation of an online newsroom that I've been a part of. This is Alabama Power's News Center at news.alabamapower.com. Many of you would probably be able to look at that and go, hey, that's a WordPress site. And you're right, it is. We're using it just as a content publishing engine, so we're not treating it as a full blog. We've got other places where we engage with customers. Twitter, Facebook, we're doing customer service, but we're not out to engage with this. This is a tool for us to get out and tell our stories. And as such, we try to incorporate multimedia efforts. Here, we're actually linking away to other coverage. You know, here's an industrial development announcement for a very small town. 40 jobs is not a big deal to you, but it is a big deal to Greenville. And we wrote our story, published our story, we linked away to existing coverage of that story, and in the process, we actually interviewed our business office manager in Greenville and kind of got his perspective on what does this mean for the community. Now, again, neutral point of view, he's talking about the value of the partnerships, the state, so many other organizations came together to help make this happen, but it's also positioning him as an expert in his community, because he is. He's very well connected. But that's going to help further his personal standing in the community, and it helps further our goals as a company as well. Doing full photo streams. I mean, you know, if you're in news release mentality, you're always about getting the one photo, okay? And in my Red Cross days, we had to get people past the idea of one photo, because you got to get on your knees, you got to get that one picture with the volunteer with the vest and the logo, handing the teddy bear to the kid in the shelter. You got to have the logo in the back. You got to have all these things to make it perfect, okay? And if you're lucky, it's on the Christmas card or the annual report. But the work of your organization cannot be told in one picture. Not when pixels are free and bandwidth is free, and you can publish as many pictures as you need. So link people away to the resources that they can use, and then track it. Here, this is our standard story about getting ready for hurricane season. Everybody wants to know what you're doing differently. What did you learn about past storms? What are you doing differently to get ready for hurricane season? So we kind of did it, and it's going to be done as a news release, because you've got people who think that way. But then we came out and we did audio cuts, all ready to go for radio stations. Just literally grab it and go. And if any of you are underestimating the power of radio, just let me tell you that there are a lot of people busting their butt every day to try and fill the news time. And if you give them a nice little story with a 12-second audio clip, an MP3 file that they can download right off of there, you're golden. You will be on every station that found it, because they're starved for content. And here you're just providing it. And feature your people, all right? I had to scroll the page on this one, but I mean, you know, feature your people. They're human. They're real. They're doing really good things. Jill Sills here does wonderful things, helping individual homes and helping small businesses become more energy efficient, helping find ways that they can save money, use less energy. It's a wonderful story. It's even more wonderful because she's smiling and she's happy about it. All right, so tell that story. All right. I want to talk a little bit more about the need. You know, we recognize that we have to get the story out, and I'm speaking to you from the perspective of an outsider in my own industry. I've been in the utility industry for 5 years, and it took me a little while to figure this out, but our entire sector, not Alabama Power, not Southern Company, but the entire utility sector as a whole has done a crappy job of telling its story for 60 years. I want you to think back to the Jetsons and Rosie the Robot, okay? Think about that time of magic. Go look at old commercials that they used to run for utility companies, where you can power the vacuum cleaner and you can wash dishes automagically. And you can keep lights on at night so the kids can read and study and better themselves. Electricity was freaking magic, all right? But we got away from that. And we went through this whole media environment where the formats just weren't there for us, and there was no real mass media appeal to telling that story. And as a result, the industry as a whole is one that you only think about when your power goes out or when you have a high bill. We've allowed ourselves as an industry to be taken for granted because we didn't get out in front and tell the story. And then when we have fewer journalists working the streets, we have fewer outlets for the story. So we were kind of put in a position where we had to tell the story ourselves if we were going to get the hits, if we were going to get the coverage. To make this work, those of you in the bigger organizations, you've got to get buy-in. You've got people on your staff that are already doing some of these things, but the problem is that if they're working on the company newsletter and they find out about this really neat story, like years ago at Alabama Power, we actually had an engineer who took off for a year. He took a year sabbatical and went to Afghanistan and helped bring Afghanistan's only hydroelectric dam back online after 30 years. Incredible story. But at the time, it was only in this one silo because the person that found out about it and developed it was doing it for the company newsletter, and that's it. It's like, well, that's a great story. I'd love to tell it, but we don't have a place to do it online. So you've got to get buy-in from all of the people who are creating any kind of content, any type of news value within your corporate communication shop. And they've just got to understand that we've got to embrace it in as many formats as we possibly can. We need to have one funnel of all the potential stories coming in, one place where we can pick and choose, and all of us with our own experiences and our own specialties can decide how to best produce that story and make it better. Most of these stories ought to be multi-channel. It can go in the employee newsletter, but it can also go on the external web, and we can also feature it in videos for in-house meetings and use it for industrial recruiting. There's so many things we can do with it because it's a great story. Multi-channel, multi-format, making sure that you're getting audio, you're getting video, you're using the best storytelling tools to tell that story. And then you got to have a platform. And I'll tell you, as someone who's been in big organizations that are very averse to change, very conservative in their culture, this platform thing deserves a lot of your attention. I wish I could have done WordPress sites at Alabama Power years ago. But it took a long time to get the right people to hear the message that, no, we're not talking about redoing everything on the company website. We just need an engine that allows us to publish. That's not TeamSite. We need an engine that allows us to publish and put things out there with sound and with video and with embeds and with maps and whatever we need to do to tell the story. Because if you don't have the right platform, you're not going to be able to do the job you need to do. And you have to have a strategy internally to try and earn this buy-in and get people on board with it. A lot of internal education. You have to get the guy who's been in print his whole life, who's working on that employee newsletter, you've got to get him to understand that there is a need for us to do video sometimes. And we need to identify that early on. We're going to use our social networks as tendrils to reach out. I love the thing that we heard yesterday about how you're not the destination. You can't just expect to bring everybody to you. But in this particular instance, you need to propagate that story out as many channels as you can, whether it, Twitter, Facebook, Flickr, even LinkedIn for some of these stories, particularly when it has to do with innovative employees and recruitment. Use the social tendrils to bring it all back. And make sure that as part of that buy-in, you teach them about analytics. We are going to measure what we do because ultimately that's going to loop back around and that's going to inform our next round of strategy, which is, all right, now what are we going to do to talk to people? Well, how are we going to decide what stories to share? How are we going to marry what we're doing with our internal brand journalism with the departmental needs and goals that each one set? All right? You've got to have a recognition that it's time to break the silos. All right? Everybody has to embrace this entire effort of telling the right story in the right way and in the right place. That means you've got to develop a lot of these stories on the front end. We're still a work in progress. News Center's been going for about 7 weeks now. And we're still kind of going through this whole thing and saying, I wish we'd have known about this interview. Because when I got that one on the phone, she was incredibly funny. And we could have used the audio from that and humanized it and put more to the story. So you develop things on the front end, you've got to develop things on the back end. You've got to say, how can I make this presentation just a little bit better? And that's actually more than just putting resources out there. I mean, how many of you remember the social media news release? It's essentially, it's an online PDF, but then you add these other things to it. You know, that's fine. But are you doing it in a way that draws the viewer to what you want? Are you using it to actually tell the story in that native format? Or do you just have a bunch of boxes that you've got to check off? All right, if it's just a matter of boxes you're checking off, you're really not investing a lot into it. You can use a checklist to make sure that you're not forgetting video when it's important. But, you know, it's more than just being a news release. And part of that process is understanding that, you know, we're not so much interested in what your title is, but you have a role to play somewhere in this. You may not know a thing about WordPress, but we are going to teach you how to recognize a story. We're going to teach you how to scout out the stories. If you have a modicum of writing talent, we want you to go ahead and log in and help create the first draft of that post. It shouldn't be a matter of us having to interview you and drag it out of you in a field office to get the information. So you want to get more people trained up. And one of the brilliant things that WordPress did a couple of years ago that's enabled this is the different administrative roles. So you can have a site administrator, and you have editors who can post live and then edit other people's stuff. You have authors who can post live but can't edit anybody else's stuff. And then you've got a level called contributor. We just did 2 rounds of training at Alabama Power with folks at contributor. And we intentionally said, repeat after me, I cannot break the site. I cannot break the site. I cannot break the site. We want them to overcome the fear of logging in and just play with it. And you know, upload the pictures if you can, and write the story the way it should be written, and write us a sample tweet, fill in do all of those little things. Because as we build them up, and as they start doing it, we say, hey, wow, we haven't had to fix anything for 2 weeks. Then we can start bumping that person up to authorship status. My counterpart in Mobile, Beth Thomas, she's very interested in being able to rapidly put out posts if there's a hurricane. Because there's going to be rapidly changing information, and here's where the resources are, and this is where the outages are, and this is what we're telling people. But it's not going to help her if she's having to go through somebody else to get it posted. So that's one of her goals. Is I want to learn, I want to get vetted so that I can post straight to that and then go right to Twitter and not have to rely on anybody else. So you got to do that in a way. The progressive roles. You start them in a comfort zone, and then you slowly add on the pieces to their competence so that eventually you've got a network of people internally who can help you with things. And that's one other piece that you've got to get sold internally. So many companies treat websites as projects. We have a budget, and we're going to allocate, and by May 1st, it will be finished. And that's not how the web works. You can't do that. It's iterative processes. It's slowly getting better. And, you know, power industry is very conservative. I was told one time, if we were a basketball team, we'd rather be 5-0 than 81-1. But you've got to get over that fear. You've got to get out and start it, and then improve with the slow iterations over time. Minor tweak here, minor tweak there. We're going to continue to find new and better ways to do this, and more efficient ways to do it, and bring more people along. You can't treat this like it's got to be perfect out of the gate. You cannot do it like it's a finished product. It's a process. It's not a product. Demand success. If you're going to demand success out of a venture like this, you've got to demand results. And that means that you measure. And one of the great things about us finally getting this WordPress platform to host our site is that we were able to get excellent analytics out of it. Google Analytics and all the tools that we want to tell us where our traffic's coming from and what it's doing. Because ultimately it's a work in progress. And those numbers that you get back are going to answer some very key questions for you. Are we covering the right kinds of news? What kinds of stories are resonating with people? What stories are they sharing? What are they propagating? We've been going now for about 6 or 7 weeks, and you can see that we've already had some spikes. And some of these spikes were a little surprising to us. We got a really nice bump out of a story that we did about a bill that we helped push through the Alabama legislature. Essentially, it said that if there's a utility worker on the side of the road and they're working, they're afforded the same protections that law enforcement or fire departments or others would get for being alongside of the road. You know, you've got to give them a wide berth if at all possible. If they see you not doing it, you can get a ticket. It's for worker safety. We help push that through. What you can't read right up here, this is actually a news release from the office of the state senator who sponsored the bill for us. So we essentially took his news release, rewrote it, republished it, and then included sound files and high-resolution versions of the photo. But we got a lot of play out of that. Next thing that came up was this really wasn't a surprise to us. So we had a lot of rain, had some flooding coming in, and we were changing our schedule on our hydroelectric facilities, on the dams, allowing more water to flow through. We've known for a long time that the most popular place on our website is where you log in to pay your bill. And the second most popular site was lakes.alabamapower.com, where people could check the lake levels and know what the generation schedules were and adjust appropriately. Big bump. And so we kind of knew that. That sort of validates, yes, we know that many of our customers are interested in this. And then this one, this scam alert. We've got scammers right now who are targeting primarily businesses run by people who speak English as a second language. Get them on the phone and say, hey, your power's about to get cut off by 3 o'clock unless you go and get this reloadable debit card and give us the number. It's brilliant in its execution. We've actually shared this post several times because it's hitting in different parts of the state, but it amazed us. We put it out there, and we got hundreds of shares on Facebook and 70 or 80 retweets on Twitter, and we saw the traffic bump on this. So over time, we're going to measure for content, we're going to measure for time of day, and we're going to measure where that traffic's coming from. And early on, I don't think it was that much of a surprise, but it was nice to validate it. About 60% of our traffic was coming from either Facebook Mobile, Facebook, or Twitter. So it was it's nice to be able to go in and say, yes, this is validating what we're doing on the social space. This is how it all works together in your big ecosystem. But you've got to measure it. If you're not measuring it, then you're not going to be able to improve it. You've got to have the data to be able to improve it. All right. We have any questions? Yes. I think they're coming up with a microphone. And if we have time at the end, I'll tell you a story about the greatest pickup line ever.
Thank you for this presentation. I find this one and the one yesterday from the Make-A-Wish Foundation very inspiring, and there's a common thread being that both organizations were able to generate content that's easy for media outlets to pick up. Where I'm having trouble is I work for a nonprofit that's geared at affecting public policy. So the changes on the ground and the interest on the ground are a little less direct. And I'm just wondering if you had any input as to how, in your opinion, we might be able to take advantage of that quick and easy to pick up content.
Yeah, you just got to make sure that you're building relationships with the other people in your organization that are creating the content, and they just got to understand that we need the big funnel. If it's not all coming through the big funnel, we're missing opportunities. And if every organization, you've got stories every day that would resonate with somebody. And now that we've got these tools that allow us to publish direct, it's great that the media still picks up on it because they're still the 700-pound gorilla. They're not the 800-pound gorilla anymore. But they can still drive a lot of your message. But you just got to get people to recognize that people on the outside will be interested in this. And then there's a whole other piece about getting either your internal brand advocates or your clients or whoever else to also pick up and share and work with them and get them trained on how to propagate that message. Yes.
Hi. I work at a nonprofit library in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I love what you had to say about the web, trying not to see the web as a in-game project, but more as a iterative, something in iterations.
Yes.
So is your site specifically something that your team constructed, or is it part of a, using WordPress? Is that part of an overall website component? You know what I'm saying?
No. We had a specific need for this newsroom that we needed a publishing engine that we could publish to. And a lot of the stuff that had been going on our regular external site was done in platforms that are very clunky, that do not allow for multimedia, do not allow for uploads. So we actually did get some outside expertise to help us skin the site so that it looks like our regular website. Most users, they won't know. They click over from our regular website and they hit the news center. It looks just the same top-level navigation as everything. But, we had to win some battles to be able to get that platform established.
I feel your pain. Could you go a little bit more into how you won that battle? Because I'm constantly facing that issue of,
Yeah,
I cannot deploy on your clunky, in-house, buggy software.
All right. For the most part, it's patience. All right. But what you've got to do is you've got to talk to the people who you anticipate will be roadblocks, and don't ask them directly, but just find out, what is their hesitation? Are they afraid because they're worried about public perception? And are they afraid of the conversation? Are they afraid that this might displace them from their job? You'll find out where this is coming from. And then, as I said, you've got to be patient. And somebody last night said this wonderfully. It's like you just got to wait for them to get kicked in the nuts. All right? And as long as you're ready with the ice pack right there and the cup, say, if you had this, you wouldn't need this. So,
Thank you.
You will never be in control of the timing, but you can be in control of your readiness to have a good, direct answer that says, this would, and sometimes it doesn't even have to be your guy getting kicked in the nuts. It could be a competitor say, wow, if that were to happen to us,
Right.
I wish. Okay. Yes.
You mentioned that no one likes TeamSite and that it was not, a user-friendly tool to use. We're going through a new content management system at my job, and we're thinking about TeamSite versus WordPress. What were the negative things that you thought about TeamSite?
TeamSite is a fantastic publishing platform for certain purposes. If you've got people across your company who are administrative assistants and they're going to be tasked with changing the content in a particular block on an intranet site or even externally, that's great because it allows you to segment it off and give them control of just this piece. All right. Years ago, WordPress was not as robust with its management roles, and it was kind of messy. If you've got a website that 50 different people are going to have access to change, you want to make sure that you've got the right type of internal paper trails and being able to track who's changed what. WordPress is getting better at that. But in our case, we had to make the particular need that we've got to be able to post videos, we've got to be able to upload sound files, upload pictures. We've got to make this look good. And we can't do it if all you give us is a box that we can't even include HTML in. All right.
What's the ROI of this, and what's the goal? Is it that you have these smaller electric companies?
Where are you?
Right here.
Okay, hi.
Hi. Do you have smaller electric companies moving in that are siphoning off your customers? Or
Well, we're actually a regulated monopoly. All right, so technically, people think that we don't have to do anything to make them happy, when in fact, customer satisfaction is the most important number in our entire business. Our driver was twofold. One, we knew that we weren't getting the coverage we used to. Secondly, our survey data told us that when a customer hears about our company, they're more than 18% more likely to rate us favorably if they know a person who works there. So telling stories about what we're doing, humanizing it, highlighting our employees, and we got hundreds of people every day who bust their butt to save our customers a nickel. But we've never told those stories. So now we've got a place to do it. And that increases customer confidence, it increases customer satisfaction, and that's so important to us. That's the leverage that we have to be able to make the moves that we need to make, whether it's borrowing or in the market or what have you. That's our currency. It's customer satisfaction. And you wouldn't think that, but it is. Let's do one more question, and I'm going to tell you guys about the greatest pickup line ever, okay?
What are your SEO initiatives, and are you seeing results and cause and effect in your SEO initiatives?
The difficult part about SEO for us is, we're confined to the state of Alabama, and we don't even have the whole state. We've got 1.4 million customers, and we're in about 2/3 of the counties of the state. We can't go and grow into somebody else's territory. So we're not in that, daily mind share, Best Buy model of, saturation. We do have specific things that we do need our customers to know about. We need them to know safety information. We need them to understand outage information and preparedness. We need them to understand how to be more energy efficient so that they can help us keep our peak load times down. It saves money for everybody if we do that. But most importantly, we just need them to know that we're people. We need to put the magic back in the electricity. And the magic comes from the people who make it happen every single day. And I'm just lucky enough that I get to talk about it. All right? So, greatest pickup line, all right, was actually uttered by me when I was 15. We moved from Idaho to Alabama when I was 14, and I was really homesick, and I wanted to go back and see my friends. So I saved up some money and worked minimum wage woodworking jobs to buy a ticket on Amtrak. And at the age of 15, I took a 3.5-day ride to Idaho, stayed for 2 weeks, and took a 3.5-day ride back. Try doing that today and see where that lands you. But along the way, I saw this girl. And she was every 15-year-old boy's dream of what the perfect woman would be. She had a cute little nose, had tan, had little kinky hair, because, you know, this was mid-'80s. Just perfect. She's 19 years old, though. And she's sitting over there, and there's a guy over there trying to buy her a drink. And I can't compete with that. But he's trying to get her to go to come on to the bar car, come on to the bar car. Trains are wonderful, by the way. I said, how am I going to compete with that? So I thought about it for a little bit, just kind of watched. And I marched up to her, and I said, Dad wants to see you in the private car right now. And she looked at me, and looked at him, looked back at me, and looked at him, and said, I'm sorry, I have to go. And we walked to the other end of the train, and I sat down and said, hi, my name's Isaac. We talked for hours. Her name was Angel. She lived in Azusa, California, and she actually lived next door to the kid that they made the movie Mask about. And one day we'll actually track her down, and she can tell her side of the story. We talked for hours, which for a 15-year-old kid on a train is scoring. So, you know, there's so many things that wrap into that, and there's so many lessons that I drew from it further down the road before I even knew I was going to be in communications. You know, be yourself, be authentic, truly listen and figure out what the other person needs, and then provide that. And to this day, that goes into the communication strategy of everything that I do. I told Jeff I'm not a marketer. I don't know what a marketer does. I'm a communicator, I'm not a marketer. And then I told him what my process is, and he said, no, you're a marketer. It's three things. No matter what you're doing in a communication landscape, it's three things. Who am I talking to? What do I want them to know? And how would I like them to feel? If you take care of that, then you're talking to the right people. You're being intentional about what you're sharing. And then you're paying attention to the tone. Is it appropriate? Is it what they need? Is it what they want to hear? And if you do that, you're going to succeed. But something like this, you know, it requires a lot of work on the front end. You've got to earn buy-in. You've got to convince people this is something that you absolutely have to do. Any other questions? All right, Rick, go ahead.
I had a quick comment and a question. The documentary that Southern Company did on the 70th anniversary, I thought was awesome because I actually thought it was a documentary until the end when I realized it was basically an hour-and-a-half commercial.
As you are talking about big bets.
It's one that basically showed how the air conditioning made the entire Southeast and electricity. But my question is Alabama, are you kind of autonomous at Alabama Power, or
Yeah.
what is the bureaucracy with?
There are four operating companies for Southern Companies: Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and Gulf, which operates down around the Pensacola area. And we are autonomous. We kind of do our own thing. We share a lot of back-end services with the rest. But even when it comes to something like this or social media, we make our decisions based on what we think our customers need and want, and then we share back best practices across the system. So I can't promise Georgia Power is going to have an online news center next year or even later this year. But we do look at what each other does, and we take and adapt and give. All right, raise your hands if you learned something. All right, raise your hands if you had fun. All right, so if you learned something and you had fun, then I didn't waste your time. So thank you.